I'm just rubbing my ball tool back and forth, back and forth. So when you're satisfied with your petals, I'll take my glue and spread some glue all over the petals. I'll just leave that part where it has movements because I don't want that part to stick on my flower. I'll take the bud that we made earlier and just poke it through, turn it upside down, and squish it. And it doesn't really matter where the petals land. You just wanted to squish it on the center. That way you have that it's almost like making a carnation, really. And this is 3 layers of the petals already. And you're gonna do about 3 more, so you have a total of 6 layers on the bud, and this is how it's going to look like. So this is 3 layers right here, and this is 6 layers right here. And you can even put pieces of tissue paper in between the petals, so it creates those spaces. It creates the spaces in between the petals because as it opens, you wanted to have a little bit more spaces in between the petals. So you'll just let it dry after you've made 6 layers already. You just let it dry upside down, hanging. So I will dry this for another 24 to 48 hours. I will dry the 6 layers of petals for another 24 or 48 hours until it's nice and sturdy. And to finish this flower, I will make 12 of these petals. And again, these petals are done just the same way as we did earlier with the white peony. And I just used the largest of the petal cutter that's in the set, or the largest teardrop if you're just using a teardrop shaped cutters. And I will dry it on a large egg mold, just like how we did the first petal that we did earlier. So I'll make 12 of those, and if you want, at this stage you can dust the petals already. And I'll show you how I dust mine. So I get a piece of scratch paper and a piece of paper towel, and I would get a flat brush. You can use a wider brush if you wanted to, and I will use an old rose petal dust. You can even use grape and flaming sword so that your petals will be darker. It really depends on the color palette that you are going to use, but for this instance I'm just going to use an old rose. What I do is I dip my brush onto the petal dust and shake it off on my scratch paper. That way I don't put too much petal dust on my brush, because you can always add to it but you can never take off. So it depends on how dark you want your petals to be. And I will start from the edge of the petals going in. And I'm just barely scraping all that petal dust on the side. And I like to use a piece of paper towel so that it catches all of the excess dust without it going to my table. I know that a lot of you have worked with petal dust before, and you know that it gets everywhere. So this way the cleaning process is much easier and faster. So I'm just dusting the petals all the way about 3/4 down. I would leave that part lighter than the rest of the petals. You can also do that on the underside of the petals. Just the same way as I did the front. So at this stage you can actually just leave it as is, just like that, or you can use a little bit of pearl dust. And pearl dust will just give our petals a little bit of a shimmer. And a lot of my students like using this because they said that it corrects their mistakes. I don't really like using a lot of it. I just wanted to give my petals a little bit of shimmer. So what I'll do, I'll take my petal, I'll use a really bushy brush, if I may say. It's like a sable brush that is a little bit poofy than the flat brush that I would use to dust my petals using petal dust, and I will just use that. And I'm doing the same thing where I dip my brush into the jar of petal dust and shake it off on the paper, on the scratch paper that I have. That way I can control how much petal dust I wanted to put on my petals. And you have to be careful when you're doing this, especially if your petal is not dried all the way through, because at that stage the petal is very vulnerable and it has a tendency to break. So I would be very, very gentle when I'm doing this step. So I'm just going to continue dusting all of my petals. And for this one, for the center of the flower, I will do the same and just dust all over. I will dust the center a little bit darker than the rest. And you can use 2 to 3 shades or even more on the petal. It depends on the look that you wanted it to be. Here I'm using again the Old Rose Petal Dust. And if I want the center to be a little bit darker, I would use a little bit of the Flaming Sword, just a tiny bit, to give it a little bit of depth and color. So I'm just continuing